Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Beam, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Secretary of the Kansas Department of Agriculture. I want to welcome you to our 5th annual Kansas Summit on Agricultural Growth. Thanks for gathering today to discuss how we can support and help grow the ag industry, particularly as it relates to the pork sector. Many of you may know that we've had this, or the agency's had this event for quite some time. This will be the 5th one. The previous 4, of course, have been large gathering of all the sectors in person. But I think we all know that we needed to look at a different approach this year, and we're really excited about this approach, at least this year, as a way to get lots of input and include people remotely who might otherwise not be available. We know these are challenging times, but one of the things that we continue to learn is the role that agriculture plays for everyone in this world as far as food supply, but specifically for the economic driver in this great state. It's just been reaffirmed, I think, and reinforced as we look over the last 4 or 5 months. But we hope that we can start the dialogue today and get input from all of you through questions and follow-up as we look at what's the best approach for moving ahead with this industry and what may be most appropriate for the state through the Department of Agriculture. So thanks again for being a part of this, for calling in, and I'm looking forward to hearing the comments. This time, I'm going to turn it over to Kelsey Olson, the department's Deputy Secretary. Kelsey.
Thank you, Secretary Beam. It's a pleasure to join everyone here today as well. Today's sector, we are looking at the pork industry, and we are excited about having an open discussion to hear from the industry directly as to what can be done, how do we support the industry in Kansas, and how do we go forward. But before we get started, and before we get to our speakers, I wanted to just touch on a couple of housekeeping items. As you know, you've been entered in as the participant, and all of our participants' lines are currently muted. At any point, if you have a question, please feel free to submit those through the Q&A box at the on your screen, and we will be monitoring those questions. If it's appropriate to address them at the moment, we can, but we'll also try to work around those as we have that dialogue following our presenters. So please feel free at any time to submit those questions. It'd be great if you could include your name, your city, and any organization that you might be affiliated with, or if you're attending on behalf of. So, and with that, I think we'll get started. It is important to note that this is being recorded, and we'll be able to post this online and for others to view at a later time. Our first speaker today is someone many of you know. Tim Stroda is the president and CEO of the Kansas Pork Association, and I've invited him to provide an update on the pork industry in Kansas today.
Good morning. Can you hear me? All right. Wanted to most of all say thank you to everybody that's joined with us today, and appreciate your support of our industry. And I know most of you, anybody that's been affiliated with us or a part of our industry, knows it's been a very challenging year. And it looks like we may have some more of that coming to us. So, but my job today that Kelsey gave me was really to give an overview of where we've been and where we're going a little bit. And so with that, Sean, if you could start my slides, I'll act like either an extension person. I'll pick on Joel is coming later, or an economist, and we'll show you some numbers and give you an idea of where we're at and where we've been. So Sean, if we can kick those up. All right, let's roll on to the next one. Okay, for those of you over the years that we've done this program, Mike, I think Mike mentioned this was the 5th year. When you go back through our numbers, our breeding inventory or number of sows has jumped around in Kansas over time. Probably the gentleman that counts those numbers for us in Kansas is probably on the call, so I got to be careful with sometimes I wonder when we lose sows where they went or where did they come back from. So of course these numbers are survey numbers, so I really can't blame Doug for them. So we do jump around, but I'd say our numbers have stayed fairly even at that 180,000 now for a number of years. So sow wise, I think we've been on the same plateau now for quite a while. Sean, can we move to the next slide? Okay, here's what shows that maybe a little more indicative of what our industry has done. As you go back to those, I pulled the last 20 years. Our total inventory from the Hogs and Pigs report shows that we have gained a little bit more than what over the years folks wonder whether Kansas, the industry is dying or whether it's growing. I get that question a lot. And I think you can see from this that we have been growing now for a good number of years. And towards the end here, we've been growing quite a bit. And folks that have been to this meeting over the last 5 years have also heard me talk about growth without profitability is just buying the bigger proverbial hay truck. And so why don't we flip to the next slide? And this I stole this one from an actual economist, so I didn't make this one up. Steve Myers was nice enough to loan this to me. As you look through there, for those of you that aren't used to seeing his slides, off to the left, if you start at 0, anything above that, basically the farmer's making money. Anything below that 0, they're losing money. And so as you look through from 2014 on to 19, you can kind of see why maybe our industry was growing. We were making money for most of those years. Now you take a look at the late 2019 and what he has projected for out into 2020. We may not be growing much for a little bit. And that's not just Kansas, that's going to be everybody. And so it's always interesting when we go through a period like this. Some of you may know I've been around for quite a while now. It's almost 35 years. So we've been through periods similar to this before. And there's always folks that are interested in growing during that time. They see that as an opportunity, and it has worked for some. And so every day my phone rings, and right now we're working on folks that are changing their business structure, maybe changing how they do business, from going from an owner to a contract grower, to folks that are looking to come into the industry. And so I'm never quite sure what my next phone call is going to be. And so that's part of my job, is always interesting, because you never know what that next phone call is going to be. But I would say if we stay in that level of profitability for all of the rest of 2020 and 2021, the first part of that may not look a lot different. I wouldn't think that we'd be growing a huge amount here. So with that, Kelsey, that kind of gives you an overview of where our industry is at and where we're going to be going, at least in the near term. And so hopefully we can solve some of the issues that we've had and get back to our normal level of profitability, which will drive our industry forward.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate you walking us through those slides today. you know, there's no doubt that we've got some challenges in the industry going forward. And um, I look to think that that's something that, you know, hopefully that we can help address and maybe try to position ourselves in the state to ride that out and to do all that we can to ensure that we continue to have a strong industry within Kansas. Um, our next presenter is going to walk us through a little bit more specifically in regards to the industry's response to COVID this year. Although he's not a Kansan, you may be familiar with him. Bill Even is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Pork Board based in Des Moines, Iowa, and his responsibility is leading the checkoff-funded research, promotion, and education projects on behalf of the nation's 60,000 pork producers. Bill has dedicated his career to serving agriculture and continues to provide leadership to the pork association or to the pork industry. So, Bill, over to you.
All right, thanks, Kelsey. Can you hear me okay? Great. Well, certainly like to thank the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Secretary Beam, and yourself for inviting me to come speak to your pork producers in Kansas today, albeit virtually. Again, my name is Bill Even. I'm your CEO at the National Pork Board here in Des Moines, Iowa, also commonly known as the Pork Checkoff. I had the pleasure of working for you in this role for the past 4 years. In addition to that, I've gotten to know Tim Stroda and the team down there really well. You guys are very fortunate. You got someone with Tim's experience to help lead you through the rough times that we sometimes have in agriculture. A little bit about myself and my background. We have a 5th-generation family farm located near Sioux Falls, South Dakota. While we're no longer in the hog business, we are actively raising corn, soybeans, and cattle, and also have a seed corn business and a small farm equipment repair business. So myself and my brother and my son are the ones that are actively involved in the operation. Those guys get to do the work most of the days. I help write the checks and come help out with planting and working cattle and the like. So Sean, if you want to go ahead and put up the first slide from my deck, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the pork checkoff and literally take a look back over about the past 4 months and what has the industry done during the middle of the COVID crisis and the shutdown of the plants and the slowdown of the plants, how your checkoff reacted, some of the things we did there, and then some learnings that we pulled out of that. We'd call it just kind of an after action review. As Tim indicated, the rest of this year and out into early 2021, looks like it's going to be a tough old grind. You look at the backed up hogs that we've got in the country, we're slowly chewing through that, but packing plant operational capacity seems to be peaking out at about 95% nationally. And so a lot of the Saturday kills are going to be incredibly important to work through this backlog. And when you talk to the packers and the processors, what they've done, you know, there's a tight labor market, and they've moved a lot of the employees up to the front end of the plant so that we can continue to harvest the animals for food. But on the back end, we found that some of those boning operations and things aren't happening. So the industry continues to work through the pandemic related problems. The good news is we're slowly getting things back into some semblance of normal, but it's going to be probably, as Tim said, through the end of the year out into early 2021 before we get things cleaned up. So with that, Sean, if you'd go to the next slide, I wanted to remind everybody a little bit around how the pork team in the United States is put together. So when you look on the left-hand side, you can see the National Pork Producers Council. They're your nation's lobbying arm. They do policy, legislation, international trade, and work on a lot of regulatory issues. And that's a voluntary investment of 10 cents per $100 of market value. In the middle, you have state associations like Kansas Pork, and there are over 40 different state pork associations. And it's incredibly important that these state associations are successful and viable, because that's where the rubber meets the road. The work that the Kansas board and Tim does down there is incredibly important for getting that last mile out in contact with the farmer, be they independent, a contract grower, or involved in integrated operations. On the right-hand side of the slide, that's the pork checkoff. So as Kelsey mentioned, we do the research, promotion, and education for the nation's industry. We've been around since the 1985 Farm Bill. That's the mandatory investment, 40 cents per $100 in market value. We are run by a 15-member farmer board of directors and a number of delegates, including delegates from Kansas. They do set what the national checkoff rate is on an annual basis. So if you go to the next slide, John, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the core competencies, as I call it, from the checkoff. So our board of directors has our organization structured with two components: build trust and add value. Building trust, if you look at those 6 points, they're all related to the We Care principles. That should be very familiar to all of you, whether it's pork quality assurance, transport quality assurance, and the like. The principles that the U.S. pork producers represent, that's really our freedom to operate platform. It's taking care of our animals, ensuring public health and food safety, being good stewards of the environment, taking care of the workers, and being part of the community is all part of who we are in the industry. Now, on the end value side, those are the components related to a lot of the research and the promotion in the industry, and you can take a look and see what those are. So on the next slide, wanted to dive in a little bit around how the pork industry was dealing with and managing the impact of COVID-19. So on the next slide, Sean, dive into it a little bit deeper. When the first plant started to close right before Easter, we recognized that this problem was going to cascade pretty rapidly, and certainly it did. The National Pork Board and the Pork Checkoff have got a crisis plan, and we immediately implemented that and essentially created, just kind of our own little incident coordination center to help kind of direct traffic and provide intel and information back to producers, back to consumers, back to the processors, back to a lot of the state veterinarians. The response for COVID, since it was not a foreign animal disease, there was no national response that occurred, but rather the state veterinarians and the state pork associations, such as Kansas, stepped up and filled that role. We worked every day. We'd start 7 a.m. with a leadership team discussion, really getting feedback from you folks, right? What's going on in the field? Where are we at with plant run rates? Where's the pressure or the problem at today? We had some very clear priorities, and this was from the board of directors. The first priority was we need to get the plants back operational, and as quickly as possible. Everybody recognized that the longer the plants were either shut down or slowed down, there were going to be some fundamental problems with backup of hogs. The other piece that was on it is certainly the emergency depopulation and disposal. Now, that didn't hit in every state at the same time. A lot of that initial impact was, I would say, in kind of the 4-state region of Minnesota, Iowa, South Dakota, and some of Nebraska. But it kind of ebbed and flowed based on the producer's position, where they were at, how current they were in the barn, and where they were able to go with their hogs to their packer based on their contracts or their slots. And then the third component that the board had as a priority was, we recognized that the pork industry was in the middle of a lot of media attention, from the plant shutdowns, looking to make sure the workers were safe, to the backup of the hogs and emergency depopulation, and then consumers worried about their ability to get meat as they were sheltering at home as well. So the third priority for the board was to ensure that the industry was going to be very proactive around how are we going to help, I would say, protect and promote pork as a brand. What is our industry, I guess, what's the industry look and feel like to the average consumer out there? And that work's underway now. So you go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the, producer outreach. During the height of the pandemic and a lot of questions and calls coming into our organization from producers, we started a very aggressive creation of materials as well as webinars. You can see the list here of resources for producers, and we held webinars every Tuesday. We even did an emergency one on a Sunday as it looked like the depopulation issue was going to escalate. We did 13 of those. We brought in, whether it's economists, folks that are operating in the packing industry, folks that represented the consumer side of the market, all designed to get information out to the producer so that they had a sense of what was going on and they knew where to turn for help and advice. We shared all these resources as well with the states, such as Tim there in Kansas, making sure that when the phone rang, as Tim mentioned, he was able to have information that he could readily deliver to you, provide a service. Able to talk, the media, of course, called pretty frequently. And so we were able to work with positioning producers to really tell their side of the story. I think that was critically important as you think about managing the image of the industry and what's really going on the farm. We all know there's a lot of information that flows out there, particularly now on social media, and it was real important to get the voice of the producer, the farmer, into that cycle. In addition to that, we switched up our communication pieces. We had both print newsletters as well as a weekly digital newsletter. It just hit on the high points. What do you really need to know this week? What are producers asking questions about, and getting that information out to them. So on the next slide, move that forward, Sean. Here are some learnings that came out of that. First, we've done some really good planning for a foreign animal disease, but when we really had to step back and look as an industry, if we had to depopulate a large number of hogs due to, say, African swine fever, we had the plans and the templates there, but we weren't quite ready. In some ways, if there's any silver lining in all of this, I think it was the realization of where we have some gaps and things we need to finish up. The National Veterinary Stockpile is an important resource for the United States, and they have resources for the poultry industry, resources for swine as well as for beef. But when you start looking at the size and the scale, it quickly became apparent that we didn't probably have enough of the right stuff in the right place at the right time. And so the USDA, to their credit, I know just this past week, I saw them issue a request for proposal to get some additional materials that we would have available for states as well as for the USDA veterinarians. That's another example, I think, of good after action planning of, okay, we got a gap, let's get on top of this and fix it. As I mentioned earlier, because this wasn't a foreign animal disease, this was a human pandemic, we actually, the state veterinarians in the respective states, along with their secretaries of agriculture and the like, were the ones that really took the lead. Every state has some slightly different environmental laws, some slightly different regulations, and what really boiled down to is we're going to be able to have the dollars available to help essentially work with emergency depopulation if needed and if necessary. The fourth bullet, it should be no surprise to any of us that are, grew up on a farm and are farm kids, but the farmer-led solutions work the best. The National Pork Board, we put out a series of $250,000 emergency weed care grants to ensure that there was the proper equipment going to be available if from an animal welfare standpoint, as well as a human safety standpoint of trying to deal with emergency depopulation. A number of the states took advantage of that to essentially tell their story, what was going on the farm, and also to build some equipment or acquire some equipment that they would have available. That's essentially, in the long run, that's equipment that's in our bank, right? Things that are in the national stockpile, things that are available at the state level and with the state pork associations. The other thing we were able to do is recognize in real time there's a research opportunity here. Now that might sound a little counterintuitive, but when you have a national situation, what can we learn as we prepare for a potential foreign animal disease? So the Pork Board and the Pork Checkoff acted pretty aggressively, and over a period of about 11 days, put together a whole series of research proposals and projects and got them deployed and out in the field. Ultimately, as I mentioned before, our job is to do this work, humanely and safely for the animals and the people involved, and try to minimize the impact in the long run. So I think that was that's some of the things that not only the Pork Board, but the states, the state veterinarians, as well as the USDA are all working on this list, as well as many other things I didn't put on. If you want to go to the next slide. I'm going to get ready to turn this over then to, turn it over to Joel and let him talk. And then at the end, we'll turn it back over to Kelsey and probably Suzanne, and then we can get into some Q&A. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill, for sharing that information. Before we jump to Joel, I have to admit I messed up earlier. We do have a couple polling questions that we'd like to take to kind of get a little bit of the temperature of our participants, and then use that as something as a discussion point following this last presentation. So if I could get those polling questions up. We have 2 of them today. So if you could, on your screen now, you should see the poll. You can select your response for one, and then there's a little slide onto the right, and you can pull that down and you'll see the second one. So I'm going to pause just for a moment and give you an opportunity to answer these polls. Okay, as you guys are finishing up with those polls, we're going to go ahead and move on. Our next speaker is Dr. Joel DeRushi. He is with the Kansas State University and is one of our top faculty members that focuses on swine extension and research. So it's a pleasure to have Joel with us, and it is worth noting that both Bill and Joel are South Dakotans originally and are jackrabbits. So I tried to think of something funny. I'm not clever and witty, but it's great to have them joining us with and stepping into representing and working with Kansas. So with that, Joel, over to you.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here, and really like to thank Kansas Department of Ag for hosting this event and having K-State part of it to give you an update of our swine activities and program, and just to give a brief overview of the ongoing activities that we normally do, some of our response where we were involved in the COVID situation this spring and ongoing currently with our producers, as well as talk about some of the students and focus we have for training that next generation of swine enthusiasts for in their careers. So really want to kind of get in. I'm one of many, or one of some here at K-State, and I'm in the animal science department and representing that group, as well as I'll talk about some of the other faculty in different departments and vet school and whatnot as we go through. So if we want to go to the next slide, Sean. So really, I want to first give an overview of our animal science department. Dr. Mike Day is our department head. He's been in this role for about a year now and helps guide the departmental direction. And one of the areas that we've been fortunate to have here at K-State is a focus on the nutrition side. Decades ago, the nutrition program was really established with a core group of faculty, and we've been able to continue that up to this point. We have an applied swine nutrition team that's myself, Bob Goodman, Mike Tokesh, and Jason Woodworth, a combination of research, extension, and teaching appointments and responsibilities through them. In addition to animal science, Dr. Cassie Jones, she helps lead a lot of our feed safety aspects as part of that team, and I have some slides a little bit later in our feed safety group. She's also involved in undergraduate research and leads that for our department and serves as an instrumental role in that. Dr. Jim Nelson's a faculty member in swine nutrition and has a research and extension appointment, been a faculty member in the department for many years. Also, it's worth noting we had some more recent retirements. Joe Hancock was a nutritionist in the department. He retired in 2016, and that position was not able to be refilled due to budget challenges that have been ongoing. The same with Dr. Dwayne Davis. He's a swine reproduction physiologist in a teaching and research role. He was our only swine-focused faculty member in the swine reproduction area. He retired in 2017, and likewise, just due to budget constraints, we have been unable to refill that particular position. Sean, next slide. In addition, we have a lot of other swine interest faculty, and so some of these faculty would be collaborators or have obviously their own programs that would do partially what they would do is in the swine areas as well as other species. In our meat and food science group, we have a number of faculties that can partner or be involved in both the meats and food science aspect. Grain science, we're very fortunate. K-State's been well known for decades as really a hub of grain science, research and teaching of students. Charles Stark and Chad Polk are partners in that and certainly do a lot in the swine area as well as feed processing. In veterinary medicine, we have a number of faculty that work in the swine area, and they're all listed there. Really a lot of antimicrobial resistance work, microbiome type work, practical disease areas as well. Steve Inslee has been with us now for a couple years and is tremendous on the mineral analysis and understanding, one of the world's experts in that. And so we really have a diverse group of faculty to help us in the veterinary side. In Ag Econ, Glenn Tonzer is our main swine go-to and really provides that type of information for producers. Ag Engineering, Pat Murphy has been retired for several years. His position wasn't refilled in a traditional facility role. We have some air quality and environmental type focus there, but from a real practical on-farm facilities, we really don't have that capability currently today in our ag engineering. But again, that position wasn't refilled in that particular manner that Pat had served for many years. All right, next slide. One of the exciting things for us this summer is the hiring of Jordan Gephardt in the veterinary medicine area. Jordan is was a student here. He got his DVM and PhD in swine nutrition. Steve Dreetz, who had long been in that position, retired earlier this year. And it was a commitment on the vet school and the College of Ag in a joint funded position that is in the College of Veterinary Medicine to hire back a production swine veterinarian. And so Jordan has a split appointment, but ultimately working in research and teaching. He'll be involved in outward extension work, really to promote swine health and management as the core area. And we're certainly excited that he's able to start here actually next week officially in this role, and appreciate the commitment of Dr. Bonnie Rush, the Dean of the Vet School, and Dr. Ernie Mitten of College of Ag for their commitment for this position. All right, next slide. Some of the faculty have been recently across the different areas been recognized, and this is just a brief summary. We won't go through all these, but these are all on a national basis, both in the teaching, extension, and research areas. Jason Woodworth there on the top right, actually this week just received the National Animal Science Service Industry Award. And again, it's nice that when some of the faculty have been able to be recognized nationally and internationally for the swine work that is done here at K-State, impacting producers and students. All right, next slide. So one of the areas we want to talk about is really back to the nutrition side. And really if you look at our extension appointments, working with producers, this is certainly a core area for our animal science department. And our ultimate goal is to be the leading swine team, providing information for producers and increasing their profitability. If we want to go to the next slide, one of the things that is really in the response and been talked a little bit about in the other speakers in terms of COVID response, one of the things that we're fortunate to have a great network of producers we have ongoing communication with, and this really led into a very harmonious transition as this came up to work with not only the producers, but many of our associations, certainly with Kansas Pork, with Tim, the KDA, NRCS, the Department of KDHE as well, looking at programs, looking at how we're going to help producers. And we were just in continuous contact during that period, and still today as these areas emerge, really have a good working relationship with. One of the things that we were able to do is provide this fact sheet on slowing down growth performance of market pigs. And really that was just gathering information that was out there, work that we had done to provide for our producers and to our agencies as producers had requests. In National Pork Board, Bill had talked earlier about some of the information they assembled. We tried to complement that with this fact sheet as well. And this was used not only in Kansas, but throughout the US by producers and by other state extension personnel to get to their producers and consultants. And so again, something that's just our job is to help producers and help those that serve the industry. And it was really, unfortunately, in times like that, you want to have other positive opportunities, but it was really a time we could pull together as a state, and we think that went very well with a good working relationship across these groups. All right, the next slide. From some of the ongoing connection that we try and establish from our swine program to producers is we formulate many of the diets for our independent Kansas swine producers. We're routinely in contact with them in the feed mills that they are serviced or they're on farm mills to provide them with that nutritional service. We assist a number of the feed companies and consultants that work on diets in addition to those on-farm mills for our Kansas producers. On the next slide, we'll get to our website, but we provide a lot of information and tools, producer tools for profitability and decision-making through our KSU Swine .org website and the Feed Safety Resources website. Mike Tokash and I serve as the state PQA Plus trainers. So we provide that service to train advisors for our Kansas producers. We do a number of record analysis, farm and feed mill visits. And again, just try and serve as that unbiased voice for our producers to help them, as well as then work with the consultants, feed companies, veterinarians that help those producers as well. All right, next slide. In terms of outreach, you know, we try and be very visible with our national media publications, National Hog Farmer and Pork Magazine. We have an ongoing relationship to provide them with a lot of content throughout the year that they use both in their digital and print media. We work with National Pork Board on a number of different projects. Currently, we have the Livability project. It's a 5-year project with Iowa State and Purdue, and I have a slide coming up. We'll talk just briefly on it. We're also, as National Pork Board has moved away from their committee basis to task forces. We have members of that, and I currently serve on the workforce task force. And so not only in Kansas, we try to provide that information and long held leadership roles at the Pork Board in those different committees, and again, try and get information out to producers. There's a lot of national education done through Pork Bridge, Sow Bridge, the National Extension Educators Group. And then certainly in Kansas, we're very involved with swine youth programs. We host Junior Swine Producer Day. 2 weeks ago, we held our annual Bob Hine Swine Classic Hog Show. We had to do it virtually this year, but we maintain that core group of youth excited about swine to help foster their development and opportunities in that. So they are our future workforce, future employees, or future returning to the farm. And so we keep a focus on our youth as well. All right, next slide. Our hub of information is our ksuswine.org website. This is a site that gets a lot of information put on it, but some things really to point out is we have a number of producer tools that they can use on farm, from feed efficiency, stocking density, certainly the feed processing, the particle size information. One of the things I want to highlight is on that first tab on the left is the Swine Nutrition Guide. This last year, we updated our KSU Swine Nutrition Guide to provide timely information, up-to-date information on aspects in nursery, sow, finishing, and just general nutrition information. This was completed through the work of a couple of PhD graduate students, as well as the faculty. And that has been a resource that a number of people have started to use, again, throughout the world. I believe, just last year we had over 100 downloads from different countries, and this Swine Nutrition Guide serves as an information, not only in Kansas, but worldwide as well. Why don't we go to the next slide? Each fall we host a KSU Swine Industry Day, and as an example, last year, we had over 400 in attendance in November. Research was conducted in over 45 experiments with over 36,000 pigs. So certainly our approach here is very applied, working with a number of not only here at our K-State facilities, but over half of our research is done off-site at commercial nurseries, commercial sow farms, commercial research finishers across the U.S., working with production systems, and that provides them value, and certainly our graduate students being trained in those types of situations as well. This last year, again, we had a lot of, we try, and not only in Kansas, but try and reach our global swine community, and feel that we are, help serve as a resource for that for our U.S. swine producers across the United States. All right, next slide. One of the things that we have developed over the last number of years is partnerships to conduct research at the commercial level. And this helps us generate relevant information for our swine producers, but again, provides an excellent mechanism for student training to prepare them for careers in the swine industry. So not only in Kansas, but throughout the US, a number of large systems and family systems have invested in commercial research facilities that we help manage or that we can do research in on a continuous basis. Okay, next slide. One of the projects I mentioned earlier, it's a 5-year project that's funded through the National Pork Board through the Pork Checkoff and FFAR for farm, and really a balance of focus here, looking at how to improve piglet survivability. You know, with approximately 1/3 of the pigs that are born that never reach market, the focus of this is for our producers and us to figure out how to do it better. It's just simply not acceptable that 1/3 of our pigs never make it to market. And so this project is focused on it. We really appreciate Pork Board's commitment on this project. And it's a multi-state, multi-university effort. Okay, next slide. Yep, we'll go one more. The feed safety team, this is a lot of information from our core group, and this really was developed through the work of Cassie Jones, Jason Woodworth, formerly Steve Dreitz, who is here, and now Jordan Gephardt is going to be the other core member. And then it spills into other members certainly collaborating as well. And we had a unique opportunity, as well as Chad Paul, Charles Stark here in the grain science, to pull together efforts to how do we look at biosecurity related to feed. And a lot of work has been done over the last many years in this area, and we're really proud of the efforts of this group. Next slide. I won't go through all of these different aspects, but really the goal is for them to help prevent foreign animal disease entry or just simply transmission of regular routine diseases, viruses or bacteria, through the feed chain supply. And so Sean, if you want to hit return a couple more times, there'll be a couple more bullets come up. But basically, not only, again, this work done in Kansas, but across the US, as well as international work as well in Vietnam, looking at biosecurity, and just, and we did some in South America with sampling at feed mills and understanding disease transfer via feed trucks, via feed delivery, and using this as a mechanism to minimize the amount of potential disease pressure or transfer that our feed supply can have, and really provide some leadership in this area. And it's certainly been a focus and will continue to be here at K-State. All right, Sean, if you hit return again, and one more time. Yeah, and this is all held in our feed safety resource webpage. A lot of information there that people can access. The next slide, really want to shift to, it's about the students. I mean, all of us on faculty, we love working with producers. We enjoy so many aspects of our job. But at the end of the day, it's about the students, and our true joy comes from interacting and working with them and training them for careers in the swine industry. We have in our swine science undergrad club, there's approximately 50 students, in the swine science class, there's approximately 50 students a year that Dr. Bob Goodband teaches. He also has an online version that students from anywhere can access and take that class as well. We have an undergraduate swine club that started just a couple years ago. And we have about 50 to 60 members that are in that, and they take on different activities and pull in people to share their experiences in the swine industry. We also have record numbers of students wanting to do undergraduate research projects. We're lining up a number of those this fall, working with our graduate students as they mentor some of the undergrads. And this is just a picture of undergrads and grads at a recent animal science meeting that they participated in. Okay, next slide. From a graduate student, and again, some of the student training and internships, last year in 2019, about 150 students had unique on-farm experiences through internships or applied research projects. And again, a number of students have been successful presenting that research or been recognized at a regional or national level through their work for both the undergrads and graduate side in their research. Next slide. One of the things that, again, if you talk to faculty in animal science, ag econ, veterinary medicine, one of the things we get we really enjoy about our positions is training and working with graduate students. In our swine nutrition program, we generally have 12 to 15 graduate students at one time. And most recently, over the last year and a half, 2 years, this is a list of all the different production systems that have employed some of our graduate students at the master's or PhD level as production swine nutritionists, some feed companies that then they would serve in nutrition and technical service roles, as well as sow equipment and feeding type positions. So again, very fortunate to have students that are out in the industry serving large numbers of swine producers themselves and impacting a lot of pigs, impacting them. So that's very rewarding for us and super proud of all the student accomplishments that they've been able to achieve. All right, next slide. And so with that, that really is what we want to kind of give as a brief current update of our swine program. We're certainly always open to thoughts and input of areas of need. This last year showed not only the ongoing producers, but routinely getting calls from producers that use our information. They maybe don't always call us and visit, but a number of producers, large and small, this last year dealing with the COVID issue, reconnected. And again, we just encourage any producers anytime that need help. That's why we're here and want to serve in that capacity. So with that, we'll turn things back over to you for other discussion.
All right, thank you very much, Joel. One of the things that I am just most proud of in general in Kansas is how collaborative we are, whether it's with K-State and the department that, you know, conducting the research and educating tomorrow's future employees, or it's our association that's engaged with the industry at the producer level and all the way really to the national level, and then that support that's provided there. I think that is something that really is a great asset to Kansas and something that I'm proud of. And I think that I'd like to think that our Growth Summit that we're participating in here today is a integral piece of that. We've heard today from our panelists, and now it's time for our participants today to provide some questions and maybe challenge some areas that they think that we can support and grow and how we need to move forward with the industry. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne Ryan Numrich. She is in our ag marketing department, and she will lead us through this next portion.
Thank you, Kelsey, and thank you to all of our panelists. Echo Kelsey's comments about how wonderful it is to work with our pork industry in the state of Kansas and across the nation. As you guys think of your questions to put into the Q&A box, I have a little bit that I want to read to you that I think is important to remember, and those are numbers about the impact of the pork industry in our state. The Kansas pork farms consume more than 30 million bushels of grain, and at 2019 prices, that is over $90 million of grain, sorghum, and corn. In addition to that, they spend over $64 million in soybean products annually. So just in terms of grain, the pork industry is certainly important to our Kansas farmers. And according to Implan economic data, they also create a lot of jobs in our state. So the pork industry has a direct output of $456.6 million and creates a little over 3,200 jobs. So definitely the pork industry is important to our state, and we appreciate everyone that contributes and is a part of that. I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A, but I did have a few, noting that Dr. Smith and Dr. McReynolds are both on the line, and Sean said he would help unmute your lines if you're able to help answer questions, because I had prepared a few regarding the Kansas pork industry's preparedness and KDA's led foreign animal disease exercise, a question regarding what else is being done at the state and national level to help keep the pork sector prepared. And I know Bill touched a little bit on that in terms of the national level, but I was just hoping either Dr. Smith or Dr. McReynolds would be able to share a little bit with us.
Yeah, Suzanne, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
We seem to have lost you, Dr. Smith.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So I don't know how much of that you heard, but I do appreciate the opportunity, and I would encourage Dr. McReynolds, if she has something to add, to please jump in. But we do continue to have, as a National Assembly or National Animal Health State Veterinarians, we do continue to have weekly conversations regarding the swine industry, whether it be ASF conversations or COVID response conversations of that. So they are continuing. We understand that, as you've heard this morning, there's been many limitations and some things we probably didn't have addressed in the past that we recognize are some deficiencies, and so that is something that the animal health folks are taking very seriously and working really hard on trying to address some of those things. So with that, Suzanne, I don't know where else you want to go, but I do want to make sure everybody understands we are continuing to have those conversations, and I think there will be some really neat outcomes out of it once we get to the point where we have some of the deficiencies vetted out.
Thank you for answering, Dr. Smith. I know we all appreciate the work that's being done to keep Kansas prepared. I did have another question that came in, and that could probably be addressed by either Tim or Bill or both of you regarding the need for more harvesting and processing capacity in Kansas or a multi-state region. I know we've had a lot of folks kind of investigating and looking into that. So kind of like to hear your opinions on the need for more harvest or processing capacity in Kansas.
Bill, do you want me to try that first, or? All right, I'll go first. This is Tim Stroda. You know, harvest capacity is something that's been talked about in Kansas for a number of years. It's not new. It's always dependent on, everything is a depends. It depends on the size that you're looking at. It depends on everything is driven around, once again, I go back to my profitability drives a lot of things, and profitability in the packing sector also drives whether somebody's interested in bringing a new plant to Kansas. And so through the recent time frame, packing plant has been a pretty good venture. The hard part that we would have is the number of pigs that we have available in Kansas probably isn't going to support the type of plant that has been built either in Oklahoma or St. Joe. As most farmers know that are part of our, those plants take a large number of pigs to drive one of them. And so that is, we kind of have you pardon the pun, we have the chicken and the egg problem. You have either don't have enough pigs to drive a plant, or if you don't have the plant, you can't really grow the pigs. And so that has been always a consideration here. And that's part of being a little bit on the fringe of the Midwest that has most of the pigs in it, is that we have to be somewhat reticent and understand that the number of pigs that we have here will not drive a major packing plant, and without help from other parts of the country. So that's my answer. Bill, you can take another shot at it if you want to.
All right, thanks, Tim. Yeah, and again, this is Bill Even from the Pork Checkoff. So over the past roughly about 3 years, we've had 3 new plants open up in the United States that are, certainly large scale plants. One is a joint venture between the Triumph producer group and the Seaboard Company, and that's in Sioux City, Iowa. Another's the Prestige plant in central Iowa, and the third is with Clemens Food Group and some producer ownership in Coldwater, Michigan. Those plants, I just say on average, they're about $1/3 billion just to get constructed, let alone then to get the labor pool and to get them operational. So as Tim indicated, these are no small ventures if you want to have something at scale. Double shift on a lot of these plants, you're probably looking at 10,000 head per shift for sure. So probably 20,000 head a day that you need to pull through. average run rate, 5.4 days a week is what we use here in the industry if you're going to have some Saturday kills as well. So as Tim indicated, it's we know there's extra capacity needed based on the number of pigs we have. The real question becomes what I think we're seeing now is probably a continuing alignment with the packing capacity, essentially the shackle space, and the production side of the system. A lot of that's is being managed now contractually. I think the issue we've got, and Tim's number showed it at the beginning of his presentation, as a nation, with the plants running at about 95% capacity and struggling to get back up to 100, it does appear that we're going to have more pigs than we've got shackle space here in the fall. So there's an economic signal and incentive that there's more capacity needed. I think the real question becomes initially, I think you'll see the production side. We've been watching the sow kill. That's up about, depending on the week, 10-12%, or 10 to 12,000 additional sow kill year over year. That shows we're reducing the breeding herd. So I think what's probably going to happen initially is we're gonna squeeze back on the production side of things nationally in order to get that aligned up with the current packing capacity we do have. Once we get into 2021 and get those numbers, that supply and demand stabilized, then you're going to get a better snapshot of where does the profitability lie and who's willing to make those type of investments of $300 to $400 million, and where would they make a next investment. I think the other piece, Tim and Suzanne, that would go along with that is a lot of questions about how do you maintain worker health and safety with some sort of a COVID type operating condition. We all know that physical distancing, staying 6 feet apart from each other, has been proven to be pretty effective, as well as masks and face coverings in order to prevent the spread of the virus. But there's a lot of manufacturing facilities in the United States, not just packing, where you've got people that work shoulder to shoulder on assembly lines. And the nation as a whole and the world as a whole is trying to figure out how do we, I would say, make capital investments back into our facilities to either put in more robotics or to figure out layout and spacing of workers, so that if there's another problem years from now, post-vaccine, how are you going to be able to operate these plants? So when we talk with the processing industry, we also hear a bit of the conversation around, there's a lot of very old plants. The plant where we used to sell hogs to, the John Morrell plant in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, now run by Smithfield, that's an 8-story gravity-fed plant. Very efficient, doesn't owe anybody any money, right? It's paid for. But when you think about, you compare that to a very new plant, the real questions become for the processing sector: what will they build? Where will they build it? I think that's your question, right? From an economic development standpoint, Suzanne. And is Kansas going to be part of that conversation? So I think if I used to run economic development for South Dakota, as well as was Secretary of Ag in South Dakota. So I've been in your shoes of how do you attract agricultural industries into your state? And so my recommendation would be to work with the North American Meat Institute. They represent beef and poultry and turkey and pork processors, and make sure you've got those relationships there. There will be investment in this sector. Some of it's going to happen just as they try to modernize older facilities. And so they're going to be, they, meaning the processing industry, is going to be looking around to find out what states are favorable. And as Tim said, where can we get the pig flow?
Thank you, Bill and Tim, for addressing that question. And Bill, I appreciate your advice, and hopefully Kansas will be at the table when there's someone looking to invest in a processing facility. My next question is for actually Dr. Darushi, and a question about how we can best support the research K-State swine program in terms of research and development of the future workforce. I know when I worked in the industry, we ran all of our research barns off of what was happening at K-State. So certainly a lot of people looking at what K-State's doing, and we want to make sure that they remain top of mind.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. You know, yeah, there's probably different ways. I think one of the biggest things is keeping keeping a swine emphasis at K-State, and we have, and I don't, you know, we've had great support for the program, and we currently do today. But with some of the challenging economic times, you know, and this has been going on for decades at universities, we can look at some. When I started my career at K-State, I came to K-State for graduate school. At that point, there were some major pork-producing states that had very robust swine nutrition programs, and today they have none. There's you know, we can count on one hand and up to maybe, I guess, two that have active swine nutrition programs left in this country. We can count probably on one hand how many have active swine reproduction programs in this country. And I'll be honest, the long-term trend is really scary in terms of the emphasis of swine-focused faculty across the U.S. And certainly there's hubs and there is activity, but those opportunities for graduate school training is much, much less today than it even was 10 years ago. We had an interview with a student this morning looking at graduate school to come here before this call. You know, and we don't have, I mean, for every one that we take in, we turn probably 3 or 4 away that we don't simply have room for. So it's really not as much even supporting the research, it's supporting keeping enough faculty to train students and be involved. I'll be honest, that is to me the most clear-cut critical need in the US across land grants and other universities from a student training is actually having enough faculty to do it. You know, we have a good core group, but we've also lost 2 faculty in the last 4 years that most likely are not being replaced. And, you know, honestly, we're 5-6 years away from more retirements, and we're trying to develop a business plan ourselves, how we sustain that because of the challenges economically at universities to train students. And so it's partnering with the commercial side is the most definite advantage that we've been able to find to have. We have a lot of industry support. We have numbers of companies that sponsor fellowships, pay for the graduate students' salary and tuition. And so those aren't the issues. The issue is making sure we maintain enough faculty, not only at K-State, but across our land grant schools that have swine producing states, areas, that we can actually get enough students trained for our industry.
Suzanne?
And that support needs to come through the legislature, but honestly, that comes through donations, you know, chair positions, fellowships, to support faculty. Because when you support faculty, the students are going to get supported as well. We can throw all the dollars we want at training students, but if there's not people to train them, it isn't going to matter long term. So we have to be strategic in terms of looking at investments at the faculty training to have them to train students and undergrads. I don't know, Bill, I know you're going to make some comments.
Yeah, if I may, thanks, Joel. And completely agree with Joel's comments. A couple of things that the pork industry nationally has been focused on and the checkoff's been involved in. First is the U.S. Pork Center of Excellence. Most people don't know what that is, but it was really the industry's, I guess, reaction as these training programs and these various land grants started to wind down or slow down or get smaller. We put together a group of folks that are trying to do distance learning and provide some opportunities. So if I'm in a university that doesn't have a swine program anymore, or doesn't have enough of the classes you mentioned, reproductive physiology, for example, hard to come by. And so how do we provide that through distance learning to students around the United States who care about wanting to be a part of the pork industry? Addition, one of the things you mentioned, the labor issue. The pork checkoff and our board of directors this year put $500,000 into a set of national scholarships for master's degree students and PhD students. The idea of trying to prime the pump in some of these critical areas, as Joel's pointing out. So if we can train some of this next generation to go into the land grants or even into the private sector, and going forward, the intent for the checkoff is to raise that probably to about $800,000 for 2021. So your checkoff dollars are working with folks like Joel to try to get some some new capacity, call it human capital, I guess, back into the system. We're firm believers in, the research is fantastic, but that's the project. The project is really the student and the ability to train that person to be a valuable mentor on a faculty. And I gotta say this, even though I'm a South Dakota State University grad, K-State does a fantastic job in helping support the nation's pork industry. You mentioned the nutrition stuff, Joel. The foundational research work around African swine fever transmission and feed is being driven by Kansas. I can't overemphasize how critical this is, and having a team of people that are A, understand it, B, experienced, and C, passionate about trying to protect the nation's pork industry and make it better. And K-State's really leading the way on that. So thank you, Joel, for everything your folks are doing.
You bet. Thanks for mentioning that and your investment in the graduate students. Yeah, we're fortunate. We were able to receive 2 of those fellowships to fund that we're starting this fall in swine nutrition. And probably the other thing, to mention around this is not only the people, but facilities. And so in Kansas, as example, I mean, we have our swine farm north of town. It was built in the late 60s. As swine faculty, it's been up to us. And again, it's been good. We've had good industry support, but it's all, as we rebuild facilities, it's all on donations from producers or the industry. We're trying to build a new farrowing house now to replace our farrowing house that was built in the late 60s. There's no state dollars. And I say no, it's really, and again, this is kind of across the U.S., but there is, South Dakota State would be an example. The state came in and donated several $1 million to get the new unit built there. We haven't been, on the animal science side, quite honestly, our deferred maintenance and facility infrastructure investments it's basically been non-existent for quite a while. And you have to have the infrastructure to train students in a modern facility so they know what they're going into. And in fact, and that's why we collaborate. We have good facilities here where we get them trained, but that's why we also partner with commercial facilities for that training. And I think, Bill, you're tying right into those type of trainings of students. And so, it's modern facilities at our land grants or wherever students are going to be trained, but it's having the partnerships with the commercial industry to be trained in those settings. So once they leave, it's not deer in the headlights about how those systems operate. They can make a fairly seamless transition a lot of times in. So working with the legislature, again, things are not good budget-wise through all of our states, but it's people and facilities, and we have plenty of students that are interested in swine. We can help foster that, but through those other investments, we can be successful and continue to be.
Thank you both for the great discussion on that question. I know that leads well into our next section, which is going to be polling questions for the audience. So those of you participating, I have some, priorities, and I would prefer you to pick 3, although it'll let you pick more than 3. So Sean will pull up those priorities, and we'll take a minute and let you select what you think should be the top priorities, which kind of guide us as we work towards supporting the pork industry in Kansas. And as soon as those results are available, we'll go ahead and have Sean share those. As you may note, there's more than what you can see on your screen. So there's a way to slide down and see all of the priorities. We've only seen about 13 responses so far. So if you're out there and you're able to select your priorities, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. So we have about 10 seconds left, and then we're going to show the results. So on your screen, you should be able to see those priorities. Is there a way, Sean, for you to scroll down so they can see? The users will have to, okay. So the users will have to scroll down to be able to see how those rank out. And it looks like managing disease outbreak and protecting food safety is definitely a priority for the folks that are participating today, as well as developing talent and training for students. So I think, Joel, that's good for you, that remains a priority for folks that are participating today. So we'll go ahead and move on and ask our panelists and our speakers today one question. I know we've used the Ag Growth Summit in the past as a way to kind of guide what Kansas does to support the pork industry. So I'll ask each of you to be thinking about and answer what is next or needed for the pork industry in Kansas. And Tim, can I start with you?
Sure, you can. That's an easy question. My answer to that would probably be flexibility. I think within the next few months here, we're going to have, unfortunately, we're going to have farms that are changing their business structure, coming in out of the business. I'm a little worried about that. That's part of what I do every day, is help farms into business and help farms out of business. That's been going on for years. And so by flexibility, I mean not only on the regulatory side, but also in the management of that actual piece of that farm is going to have things that they need to do, and helping them make that go smoothly during a bad time would be very nice to have that support. And while that sounds a negative way of doing things, but that's part of what I do during the day. So as we move forward, the flip of that is that I'm going to be also trying to match farms that are going out of business. Those pig buildings don't go anywhere. They just change owners during bad times, or they change business structures. But the buildings are still there, and there's usually somebody that wants to try their hand and bring pigs back into those buildings. So flexibility into how we do that, making those changes is also would be very helpful as we look at state departments, Department of Ag, through your water permitting, as we look through KDHE and the environmental side. That flexibility is very helpful to make those transitions as smooth as it can be.
Very good. Joel, would you like to answer?
Yeah, as I was writing down some notes, Tim kind of took a couple of those. We must be thinking the same thing. But I think the biggest thing, again, short term, with some of the economic challenges, is just our producers continue to be open in communication with their advisors. So Kansas Pork, certainly our veterinary group in Kansas serves as a large advisor group and business decision. Us in Extension, or their genetic, whoever they use as their advisors. These times get very challenging, and sometimes they don't want to be as open, but it's a time where we just got to talk through things as much as possible. Long term, it's developing that business model that makes the most sense, and it's back to the market access and packing and the processing, and how we can look at that longer term. Again, the businesses that are involved and have equity shares, they have some security. Those that don't, they still have contracts, but what does that look like going forward? And you know, and just where the opportunities are of ownership versus contract growing. Again, we use the example of other states. Contract growing is really the way of business for many, and they've been able to do that and provide the next generation coming back home without owning the pigs, but they have the facilities. And I see that in the area I grew up in many areas that provides a very sustainable pork production model. And how we evolve that potential to evolve a business of that, but we also have to have people wanting to come into the state that have the ownership of those pigs, and then again the whole permitting process and that transition. So I think just really looking at the strengths of the current pork business and how they can capitalize, or if they have to do a pivot, what that looks like and how they find the most, you know, to be as positive and what's the best long-term for their business decisions. So.
Thank you. Bill, do you want to take a?
Sure. Take a stab at this. So
Yeah.
really good advice from both Tim and Joel. You know, I think Tim's point around flexibility, I give you an example. With a lot of the hogs backed up in the country, there's been a lot of conversations with producers, with whether it's your ag department or Department of Environmental Quality, whoever's in charge of managing, you know, essentially the number of head in your facility or what you're permitted at. I think that's an excellent point that Tim is making, and it's the flexibility from the State Pork Association, flexibility from Kansas State, flexibility from the Department of Ag, and all the other agencies in Kansas. You know, this nation and our citizens are going through a rough time. We're in a recession, and I think the hallmark of good government in those situations is really staying close to your citizens and your taxpayers and helping them work through their problems and their issues so that they can be viable, come out the other end and still have a job, make a living, pay taxes, right? And be part of the fabric of Kansas. And I think the point that we usually see at the national level is the ensuring that states are welcoming to agriculture in general and livestock agriculture in particular. There's a lot of misinformation out there that the checkoff combats daily around how do you raise your pigs and how are you caring for the environment. We do have an incredibly positive story to tell of pork production in the United States. And I think ensuring that the Kansas Department of Agriculture, as you know, you're both a regulator, but you're also a promoter, right, of agriculture in your state. And you can send some really clear signals as a state around, as Tim mentioned, being flexible and helping people when the chips are down. And as Joel mentioned, regular communication with all the team of advisors, including the government agencies you'd interact with as a producer. That sends pretty clear signal. Are you an ag-friendly state, or you're not really interested in having agriculture as part of your economy? And it's pretty clear to me when you look at the new national lab being built there in Kansas for the USDA. You look at the powerhouse that's Kansas State in agriculture research, and you look at the growth of the pork industry in Kansas. I think that pretty much tells me that Kansas is open for business. You're open for business in agriculture, and it's going to be rough. It doesn't matter what you're raising, cattle or hogs or corn or soybeans or sunflowers or sorghum. It's just a rough spot right now. And if we watch each other's backs through this, we want as many people as possible to come out the other end and still be viable in business.
Thank you all for your answers. I know there are some challenging times ahead, but KDA is here. We're willing to listen to your concerns. If you have some now, if you think of some 2 months down the road, don't hesitate to pick up the phone, give us a call, stop by. We welcome anyone to come by and see us here in Manhattan. We definitely had an all-star lineup today, and I know some folks may have registered that weren't able to log on today. Some people may be interested in watching later. And I just have some closing comments about some upcoming opportunities to be involved in the Ag Summit going forward. The recording of today's webinar will be posted at www.agriculture.ks.gov/summit in the next week. There are also opportunities to join us for some of our crossover topics, which will be on August 17th, August 18th, and August 19th, and you can see those topics listed on your screen. Additionally, this year we are hosting a kind of summary of all of the segments that we've talked about on Thursday, August 20th, and we will have a keynote speaker and a summary for everyone to participate on that date. And lastly, this year we're rolling out a new program called the Ag Heroes, and we're now accepting nominations for that program. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, Kansas farmers, ranchers, and agribusinesses have performed essential functions to keep food on the tables of people worldwide. KDA has established this program as a way to recognize those in the agriculture industry who went above and beyond to serve others and better their community. We're encouraging you to nominate any individual, family, or business in Kansas agriculture that you feel provided notable contributions as a whole. This period is open until August 10th, so we encourage you to nominate someone for this award. Thank you again for your participation today. I think we had a really great discussion. Like I said, we're open to feedback or concerns or ideas you have. We'd love to grow agriculture with you, and we thank you for your time today.
Thanks much.